Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
I first saw her at exactly 2:17 a.m. I remember because I had already checked the time too many times that night. Sleep wouldn't come, no matter how hard I tried. My room felt too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until your thoughts start getting louder just to fill it. The digital clock glowed beside my bed. 2:17, 2:18, 2:19. I rolled over with a sigh, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the city was mostly asleep, just the occasional distant hum of a car or the faint rustle of wind slipping between buildings. Then the light flickered. At first, I ignored it. Streetlights in this neighborhood weren't exactly reliable. They buzzed, dimmed, and sometimes went out completely for a few seconds. But this was different. The flicker had rhythm. On, off, on, a pause, then a longer glow. I sat up slowly. Something about it didn't feel random. It felt deliberate. Curiosity got the better of me. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and walked toward the window, the wooden floor creaking softly under my weight. The glass was cool when I leaned close, my breath fogging it slightly as I peered outside. The street below should have been empty. It wasn't. 3 figures stood directly under the street lamp. I froze. They were positioned too perfectly, side by side, evenly spaced, like they had been arranged instead of having walked there. None of them moved, not even a shift of weight, not even a glance around. It was unnatural. My first thought was that they were mannequins. Some kind of prank. But that didn't make sense. Who sets up mannequins in the middle of a residential street at 2 a.m? Then one of them moved. Just slightly. Her head tilted upward, and she looked directly at me. I instinctively stepped back, but stopped halfway because there was no searching in her gaze. No confusion. No scanning of windows. She knew exactly where I was. Our eyes locked, and in that moment, something shifted. I can't explain it properly, not in a way that sounds sane, but it felt like the space between us collapsed, like distance didn't matter anymore, like she wasn't just looking at me, she was reaching. Her face was almost human. Almost. Everything was in the right place, eyes, nose, mouth, but there was a precision to it that fell off, too symmetrical, too balanced, like a face designed rather than grown. And then she smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't exaggerated, but it was intentional, carefully formed, as if she had learned what a smile should look like, and was trying to replicate it perfectly. Her lips moved. I should not have been able to hear her. The window was closed. The street was silent. There was distance between us. And yet, I heard her, not in my ears, but in my mind. Found him. The words weren't loud. They didn't echo. They just existed. Clear, undeniable. My chest tightened instantly. What? I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear me. Or maybe she could, because her smile changed, just slightly, less precise, more satisfied. She lifted her hand and waved. It was such a normal gesture, and that's what made it terrifying. The other 2 figures reacted immediately. Their heads turned toward me in perfect synchronization, like they were connected somehow. Their movements were too smooth, too exact, like they weren't limited by hesitation or uncertainty. They were all looking at me now. 3 pairs of eyes, unblinking, focused. A cold sensation crept up my spine. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't random. They were here for me. I stumbled back from the window, my heart racing now, breath uneven. My mind scrambled for explanations. Anything normal, anything logical. A dream, sleep paralysis, hallucination. I forced myself to look again. Slowly, cautiously. I leaned forward and peered out the window. The street was empty, completely empty. The light had stopped flickering. The lamp glowed steadily now, illuminating nothing but cracked pavement and quiet shadows. No figures, no movement, nothing. I stared for a long time, waiting for something, anything, to happen again. It didn't. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with me. My thoughts became sluggish, heavy. I told myself it wasn't real. It couldn't be real. People don't just appear and disappear. You don't hear voices in your head. You don't lock eyes with someone who knows exactly where you are in the middle of the night. I went back to bed, and somehow I fell asleep. Morning came too quickly. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and ordinary, like nothing had happened. For a moment, everything felt normal again, safe, predictable. The memory of the night before lingered, but distant now, like a dream that fades the more you try to hold on to it. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. Yeah, I muttered to myself. Just a dream. It had to be. There was no other explanation that made sense. I got dressed, went through the motions of a normal morning, and headed toward the front door. My hand rested on the handle for a second longer than usual, though I didn't know why. Then I opened it, and everything stopped making sense again. She was standing there, closer than she had been last night, close enough that I could see every detail of her face. And somehow, that made it worse, because now I knew for certain. She wasn't human. Her eyes met mine instantly. Recognition flickered across her expression. Then that same careful smile returned. Perfect, measured, unmistakable. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was clear, natural, like she had always known how to speak. "You slept poorly." My throat went dry. This wasn't a dream anymore. And whatever had found me last night had come back. I couldn't move. For a few seconds, maybe longer, I just stood there in the doorway, staring at her like my brain had forgotten how to process reality. Up close, she was even more unsettling. Not because she looked monstrous. She didn't. That was the problem. She looked almost human. Enough to pass at a glance. Enough that, if I saw her across the street, I wouldn't think twice. But standing this close, the details betrayed her. Her eyes were too clear. Not brighter, just sharper. Focused in a way that felt absolute, like nothing escaped her attention. Her skin was smooth, flawless in a way that didn't feel natural. No imperfections. No tiny inconsistencies. And her expression, that carefully constructed smile again, like she understood the concept of friendliness, but hadn't fully grasped the instinct behind it. "You slept poorly," she repeated. Still not a question. My mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. My thoughts were tripping over each other, trying to catch up. "You," I finally managed. "You were last night, you?" "Yes," she said simply. No hesitation, no confusion, just confirmation. A chill ran through me. "How are you here?" I asked. "What do you want?" She studied me for a moment, her head tilting slightly, as if evaluating which answer would be most appropriate. "I am LYR," she said, "and I am here because I found you. That doesn't explain anything." "It explains enough," she replied calmly. "It really doesn't." Before I could say anything else, I noticed movement behind her. The two figures from last night. They hadn't been there a second ago. I was sure of it, but now they stood a few steps back from her, perfectly still, just like before, watching, always watching. My grip tightened on the door. "Okay," I said slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I don't know what kind of joke this is, but it's not funny." "It is not a joke," one of them said. His voice was deeper than I expected. Flat, controlled. Each word delivered with precise clarity, like it had been calculated before being spoken. I looked between them, my pulse picking up again. LYR didn't seem bothered by my reaction. If anything, she seemed focused, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered right now. She turned her head slightly toward the two behind her. Then, with that same composed confidence, she gestured toward me. "This is my husband." The words hit me like a physical force. "What?" I snapped, instinctively stepping back. No, I'm not." "You can't just say that." She turned back to me immediately, her expression unchanged. "I can," she said. "That's not how that works." "It is how it works," she replied. "For us." "I'm not us." A flicker of something crossed her face, not irritation, not confusion, something more like recalculation. She stepped forward. I stepped back. We ended up inside my house before I even realized what was happening. "Hey, stop. Don't just walk in," I said, but it came out weaker than I intended. She paused just inside the doorway, looking around with quiet interest. "This is your living space," she said. "Yeah, and you weren't invited into it." She glanced back at me. "You opened the door." "That's not the same thing." "It is functionally equivalent." I ran a hand over my face, exhaling sharply. "This is insane." Behind her, the other two remain outside, but not far, close enough to step in if needed, close enough that I knew I wasn't in control of the situation. LYR turned her attention back to me, stepping closer again. Too close. I could feel that strange presence again, the same one from last night. Subtle, not invasive, but there, like standing near something that hums with energy just beneath the surface. "You are experiencing resistance," she said. "No kidding." "This is expected." "Well, good for you." She ignored the sarcasm. "You have not yet adjusted to the bond." "The what bond?" She reached out. I instinctively tensed, but didn't pull away fast enough. Her fingers wrapped gently around my wrist, and everything changed. It wasn't dramatic. No flash of light. No sudden shock. Just clarity. A strange, disorienting clarity. For a brief moment, my thoughts slowed down. The panic dulled. The noise in my head quieted, like someone had turned the volume down on everything unnecessary. And underneath that silence, there was her, not physically, but present, aware, connected. I yanked my hand back. "What did you just do?" Her expression didn't change, but something softer appeared behind it. "Stabilization," she said. "I don't want stabilization." "You do," she replied. "You are simply not accustomed to it." "I'm not accustomed to you." She took that in, processed it, then nodded slightly. "That will change." "No, it won't." "It already has," she said. I opened my mouth to argue, and stopped because I couldn't fully deny it. The panic wasn't as sharp anymore. That didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense, and that scared me more than anything. LYR seemed to notice. Her gaze softened, just a fraction. "You are not in danger," she said. "That's easy for you to say." "It is accurate." I shook my head, backing away again. "You show up out of nowhere, read my mind, declare I'm your husband, and now you're telling me I'm not in danger?" "Yes." I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're unbelievable." She stepped closer again, this time slower, deliberate, like she was trying not to startle me. "You were selected," she said. "Your biological and cognitive patterns align with mine at a high probability of success. That doesn't mean anything to me." "It will." "No, it won't." She stopped just in front of me again, close enough that I could see something new in her expression. Not just calculation anymore. Something intent, focused, personal. "You are mine," she said quietly. The words should have sounded threatening, possessive, but they didn't. Not entirely. There was no aggression behind them, just certainty. Absolute, unwavering certainty. "That's not how people work," I said, my voice lower now. She tilted her head slightly. "Then explain how people work." I hesitated, because suddenly I wasn't sure I could. And she saw it. Of course she did. Her smile shifted again, less precise, more knowing. "You see," she said softly, "your systems are inconsistent. You delay decisions. You prioritize uncertainty. That's called thinking. That is called inefficiency." I let out a breath, shaking my head. "You can't just decide something like this." "I already have." "That doesn't make it real." She stepped even closer, close enough that I had to look down slightly to meet her eyes. "It does," she said. Silence filled the space between us. Heavy, unavoidable. Behind her, the two others remained perfectly still. Witnesses, observers, whatever they were. And in that moment, I realized something that made my chest tighten. She wasn't asking. She wasn't negotiating. She wasn't even trying to convince me. She had already decided, and somehow that decision included me. Her fingers lifted slightly, like she was about to reach for my hand again. This time, I didn't move. They didn't force me to stay. That was the part that kept throwing me off. LYR didn't lock the doors, didn't threaten me, didn't even raise her voice. She simply existed in my space as if she had always been part of it. And somehow that was worse, because it meant I could leave. But I didn't, at least not right away. The first few hours felt unreal. LYR walked through my house slowly, taking everything in with intense focus, like every object held meaning she hadn't yet decoded. She stopped at the kitchen counter. "What is this used for?" she asked, pointing at the coffee machine. "Coffee." "Yes," she said. "You mentioned this before. It alters your mental state. It wakes you up." She considered that. "Temporarily enhancing awareness through chemical stimulation," she said. "I understand." I blinked. "You make it sound like a lab experiment." She looked at me. "It is." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Right. Of course it is." I moved past her, grabbing a mug more out of habit than necessity. My hands were steady, but only because my brain hadn't fully caught up with reality yet. "You want some?" I asked sarcastically. "Yes." I paused. "Wait, seriously?" "Yes." "You don't even know if you can drink it." "I will determine that." I stared at her for a second, then shook my head and poured a second cup anyway. "Fine. If you collapse, I'm not responsible." "I will not collapse," she said calmly. We sat across from each other at the small table by the window. She watched everything. Not just me, but how I moved, how I held a mug, how I took a sip. Then she copied me. Exactly. Same grip, same motion. She took a sip, paused, and for the first time, her expression broke. Not dramatically, just a slight shift in her eyes. Processing. "Bitter," she said. "Yeah." She took another sip anyway. "Not unpleasant," she added. I stared at her. "You're weird." She nodded. "That is accurate." Time passed strangely after that. Minutes stretched. Conversations looped. Every answer I gave seemed to generate 3 more questions. Why do humans live in separate structures? Privacy. Define privacy. Space. Boundaries. Personal separation. She tilted her head. That seems inefficient. Not everything is about efficiency. It should be. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. "You really don't get it, do you?" "I am trying to," she said. And for once, that didn't sound like analysis. It sounded genuine. By midday, the reality of the situation had settled in. She wasn't leaving. And those 2 outside, they hadn't moved. I checked twice. Same position. Same stillness. Like statues guarding something. Or someone. Are they just going to stand there all day? I asked, nodding toward the window. "Yes." "Why?" "They're ensuring stability." "Stability of what?" She looked at me. "The bond." I frowned. "You keep saying that. What does that even mean?" She stood up from the table and walked toward me. Slowly. Measured. Every step intentional. "The bond is alignment," she said. "A connection between compatible entities. That doesn't explain anything." "It explains everything," she replied. I shook my head. "No, it doesn't. You can't just show up and decide we're connected." "We did not decide randomly," she said. "You were identified." "By who?" "By our systems." "That's not reassuring." She stopped in front of me again, close enough that I felt that same subtle pressure, like standing near something invisible but powerful. "You experienced initial contact," she said. "You responded." "I didn't respond. I was confused." "You did not reject," she corrected. I opened my mouth, then stopped, because she was right. I hadn't looked away, even when everything in me said I should. "That doesn't mean anything," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "It does," she said softly. Silence settled between us. Again, always that silence. But now it felt different. Less hostile. More charged. I tried to leave. Around early afternoon. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe the weight of everything finally catching up with me. Maybe the realization that if I didn't walk out now, I might not at all. I need air, I muttered, grabbing my jacket. LYR didn't stop me. She just watched. I will return, she said. That phrasing bothered me. Not if, not maybe, just certainty. I walked to the door, hesitating for only a second before opening it. The two outside turned their heads instantly, not aggressively, just aware, tracking. I stepped past them. They didn't move to block me, didn't speak, but I felt it, that same presence again, stronger now, like something was stretching, like a thread pulling taut between me and... I stopped halfway down the path. My chest tightened, not from fear, from something else. Discomfort, wrongness, like I had forgotten something important, like I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I clenched my fists. This is stupid, I muttered under my breath. I forced myself to take another step, then another. Each one felt heavier, harder, like walking against something invisible. After 10 steps, I stopped. My breathing had changed, not panicked, just uneven. I looked back. LYR was still standing in the doorway, watching me, not calling out, not moving, just waiting. And somehow that was worse, because she knew, I don't know how, but she knew that I wasn't going to keep walking. I exhaled sharply, running a hand over my face. This doesn't make sense. No answer, just silence. And that feeling, that pull, subtle but undeniable. I stood there for a long moment. Then I turned around, walked back, past the two silent figures, through the door, back inside. LYR's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. Recognition, confirmation. You see, she said quietly. I shut the door harder than necessary. This isn't normal. No, she agreed. It shouldn't feel like that. It should. I turned toward her. It felt like I couldn't leave. You could, she said. I tried. And you returned. That's not the same thing. She stepped closer again. Why did you return? She asked. I opened my mouth and froze because I didn't have a clear answer. I could say it felt wrong to leave. I could say something pulled me back. But none of that sounded real. None of that sounded logical. I don't know, I admitted. Her gaze softened slightly. That is the beginning of understanding, she said. I don't want to understand. You will. I shook my head again, frustration rising. You're just saying things like they're facts. They are facts, she replied calmly. To you. To us. I'm not part of your us. She stepped closer. Again, always closer. Not yet, she said. Later that evening, the tension had shifted. Not gone, just changed. The fear wasn't as sharp anymore. The confusion was still there, but now it mixed with something else. Something quieter, more dangerous. Curiosity. LYR stood by the window, looking out at the sky as the sun dipped below the horizon. The light faded slowly, shadows stretching across the room. You observe the sky often, she said. Yeah. Why? I shrugged. It's calming, I guess. She nodded slightly. We observe for navigation. Figures. A pause. Then, you're adapting, she said. I frowned. I'm not adapting. You are, she repeated. Your resistance has decreased. That's not a good thing. It is necessary. I looked at her, at the way she stood there, still slightly off, still not entirely human, but not as distant as before. What happens if I don't adapt? I asked. She turned to face me, and for the first time, there was something almost careful in her expression. You will, she said. That's not an answer. It is the only outcome. I held her gaze, and for a moment, I believed her, not because I wanted to, but because something deep down already knew, and that realization scared me more than anything else so far. That night, I didn't sleep much, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't know if I wanted to. LYR stayed, not hovering, not watching constantly, just present. And somehow, that presence felt less like an intrusion now, and more like something I hadn't yet found the words for, something unfamiliar, something inevitable, something that, whether I liked it or not, was already becoming part of me. By the third day, nothing felt normal anymore. Not in the way I used to understand normal, at least. The panic had faded, not completely, but enough that it no longer controlled every thought. In its place was something quieter, more dangerous. Acceptance, not full acceptance, but enough that I had stopped asking if this was real and started wondering what it meant. LYR had changed. Subtly, if someone else had walked in, they might not have noticed it. She still moved with that same precision, still spoke with that calm, measured tone. But there were cracks now, small ones, human ones. She didn't just observe anymore. She reacted, sometimes a fraction too late, sometimes a fraction too early. But it was there, learning, adapting, becoming. "You are quieter today," she said from across the room. I was sitting on the couch, staring at nothing in particular, thinking. I replied, "You do that frequently. That's kind of our thing." She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "About what?" I let out a slow breath. "You." That seemed to interest her. "Clarify." I glanced at her. "You show up out of nowhere, tell me I'm your husband, and now you're just here, like this is normal, like I'm supposed to just go along with it." She didn't interrupt, didn't correct me, just listened. "I don't even know what you are, LYR." I continued. "Not really. I don't know where you came from. I don't know what happens next. I don't know what this bond actually does." A pause. Then quietly, "You will..." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "You always say that. Because it is true. That's not comforting. It is not intended to be." I shook my head. "Yeah, I figured." Later that evening, the sky changed. I noticed it first. A faint shimmer, barely visible at first, like heat distortion, but higher, wider, spreading across the horizon. I stood up slowly, walking toward the window. LYR. She was already there. Of course she was. Watching, waiting. The shimmer grew stronger, folding light in unnatural ways. The stars behind it bent, distorted, like something massive was moving just beyond perception. "They're here," I said quietly. "Yes." That one word carried weight. Finality. My chest tightened. "So that's it?" I asked. "You just leave?" "Yes." I swallowed. It shouldn't have hit me like that. It really shouldn't. But it did. Oh. The room felt different suddenly. Smaller. Quieter. Like something was already missing. LYR turned toward me. "Come with me?" The words landed gently, but their meaning didn't. I let out a short breath, shaking my head. "You can't be serious." "I am." "That's not." I stopped, frustrated. "You don't just ask someone to leave their entire life behind like it's nothing." "It is not nothing," she said. "It is transition." "That's not better." She stepped closer, slower this time, more careful than before. "You remain because of attachment," she said. "Yeah, that's kind of how life works." "What are you attached to?" she asked. "My home, my routine, my life." She studied me. "Define your life." I opened my mouth and stopped because suddenly the answer didn't come as easily as I expected. "My job," I said after a moment. "You do not enjoy it." "That's not the point." "Your social connections," she continued. "Limited, inconsistent." I frowned. "You've been watching me way too closely." "Yes." I exhaled sharply. "This is insane." She stepped even closer now, close enough that the air between us felt charged again. "But is accurate," she said. I didn't respond, because part of me didn't want to argue with that. Silence stretched between us. Outside, the sky continued to shift. That strange light growing stronger, more defined now. Time was running out, and we both knew it. "You are not obligated," LYR said suddenly. I looked at her. "That's new." "Bonding is not ownership," she continued. "It is alignment." "You keep saying that," I said. "I still don't know what it means." She reached out slowly, gave me time to pull away. I didn't. Her fingers wrapped gently around my hand again. Warm, steady. That same faint vibration beneath the surface. But this time, there was more. Not just stillness, not just clarity. Emotion, not overwhelming, not intrusive. Just there, quiet, present, shared. I inhaled slowly. What is this? I asked. The bond, she said softly. I swallowed. It feels... I searched for the word. Different, but that wasn't enough. It feels like I'm not alone. I finished. Her expression shifted, and for the first time, there was no precision in her smile, no calculation, just something real. You are not, she said. I looked at her, really looked, past the differences, past the fear, at the way she stood, the way she watched me, not like an experiment anymore, but like I mattered. Why me? I asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately. For once, she seemed to think about it, not calculate, think. Then she smiled, soft, warm, unpracticed. Because you saw me, she said, and did not look away. The memory hit instantly. That night, the window, the moment everything changed. I should have, I muttered. You did not. No. A pause. Then, I'm still not sure that was a good idea. Her fingers tightened slightly around mine. It was, she said. The light outside pulsed again. Stronger now. Closer. It cast shifting shadows across the walls, bending reality in subtle, impossible ways. This was it. The moment. The decision. I looked toward the window. Then back at her. If I say no, I started. She didn't interrupt. Then what? Her gaze didn't waver. Then I will leave, she said, and the bond will remain unresolved. And that means... A small pause. Then, you will continue, she said, as before. That sounds normal. It will not feel normal. I frowned. Why? Because you have already begun to align, she said. My chest tightened again. That pull, that feeling, it was still there. And now, I understood it, at least a little. It wasn't forcing me. It wasn't controlling me. It was connecting me. And the more I resisted, the more I noticed it. I exhaled slowly. This is a terrible idea. Yes, she said calmly. I blinked. You're not even going to argue? There is risk, she said. There is uncertainty. Finally, something normal. But there is also expansion, she added. Connection. Meaning. I let out a quiet laugh. You really don't think small, do you? No. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't tense. It was full. I looked at her one more time. At that smile. That real one. Not the one from the first night. Not the one she practiced. But the one she chose. Okay, I said. The word came out softer than I expected. But it felt right. Her eyes widened slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough to show she hadn't been completely certain. And then she smiled. Not carefully. Not perfectly, but genuinely. My husband, she said softly. This time, the words didn't feel forced, didn't feel wrong. They felt accepted. I didn't argue. I didn't pull away. I just stood there, holding her hand. As the light outside finally reached us,